Can you ask someone? Well, we need to know where we were disconnected.
Okay.
I don't know if it's best to do it on text or asking them verbally.
I think we'll ask them verbally. Well, I'll put it on text.
Okay, tell everyone to refresh their pages. You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you should be hearing us now. Let us know if we're back and you can hear us. And then if you can hear us, let us know where we left off. I'm going to be right back.
You checking on the router. Make sure we're fully plugged in. Yay, we're back. Irv says we're back.
Okay, where did we leave off?
All right. If anyone remembers what we were saying when we disappeared, let us know and we'll try to pick up from there.
We probably just said the most important thing we'll ever say for your nose or career. And we'll never be able to repeat it. Okay.
All right. Well, I think if we probably just restart talking about this corner, we'll probably be fine.
So, sorry about that. I think it was an internal YouTube thing. So, what I was saying about this corner was that we have a hide up here, okay? And as you came down this wall, you kind of wedged the dog in this way, and then you moved up here, up right alongside the dog's shoulder, right? And we're up here alongside the dog's shoulder, maybe anticipating a reinforcement moment, maybe trying to shape the dog's pattern around this corner. But normally we'd be somewhere back here. And in my opinion, that's one of the reasons it's important to be back here, is because this puts pressure on the dog. That's what helps the dog go around the corner, is the pressure. But that pressure also distracts the dog from doing their job up here. Okay? So let's watch that as the dog goes forward. Okay? It's a nice turn of a corner. If there hadn't been a hide there, the dog walked past, right?
Yeah, fortunately, the dog catches it in just a couple steps.
Okay, catches it, brings the nose up. Okay.
And these sorts of edges are so important. You want to give your dog access to things like door jambs, ends of walls, outside corners. Super important. So if your search area ended before that end of the wall, you would still want to give them access to that. Absolutely.
My rule of thumb on exteriors is 3 feet beyond each edge of the search area. So now, the next thing is, one of the reasons I'm so critical of running behind the dog is because the dog might change direction and then bump into you. So here we have a narrow channel. Notice the dog is, if we look at this as like a two-lane street, the dog is in their lane, the handler's in their lane. Okay, this is nice. However, we should also assess how deep does the handler need to go, or how far can we let the dog go without putting too much pressure on them, right? And so what we see here is the dog slows down and shifts direction, and the handler is still moving forward, and that causes a small crash. Okay, see how much closer we are? Whereas we could have just stayed out here and backed up as the dog switched direction, but instead we decided to switch sides, which that works too. It works, but it's a different type of pressure that's going to affect the dog differently, right?
And this dog in this situation handles it pretty well. Some dogs may not. But it might have disconnected her more from the odor picture because she doesn't work it from that edge.
Yeah. I think had you stepped back here, it would have been less pressure on the dog, and the dog may have worked it to source from there. So now the dog has had 2 passes. We can't really know whether the dog would have had it had you handled differently, but this is my experience, is that the less pressure we put on the dog tends to actually work the odor a little better. So now
this time, handler giving more space. Yeah. Quite a bit more of the line is out.
Much further from the dog, even than they were earlier in the search, right? We've given the dog a lot more space. And notice, we're allowing the dog to overtake the handle. We're staying back here, so we're now at an angle instead of right at the dog's shoulder, right? then the dog goes there, finds the hide. Now we're going to look, okay? So in general, after I find this hide, where am I going next? I'm going to come down this wall. That's the one place I haven't searched. So I'm going to...
Assuming that your exterior end's kind of around here.
And even, exactly. I'm not going to... I might go down this channel, but that's the same difference. But I'm probably not going to go back the way I came, right? So in general, I'm going to go over here and feed from this side to arc the dog naturally in the direction that I kind of want them to go. The dog still has freedom to go either direction they want, but now I know which side I'm going to influence. But notice that this is a comfort side. So when I see this, and even when it's actually easier to get on this side, but you go out of your way to go around the dog this way, that means that we have a bias to feeding from a particular side of the dog, probably with a particular hand that we're used to feeding with.
Even though it would be the most smooth to pay with the same hand, her right hand, but be on the right side of the dog.
Absolutely. Yeah, so keep that in mind, and it may be time to do some exercises where you're only allowed to feed with your left hand on the right side of the dog. And just mix it up so until you become ambidextrous, able to do whatever you can, and then you can pick and choose the tool for the job.
And you probably, if this is a very, very strong bias, need to do it in front of someone who can tell you that you are starting to go in on the wrong side, because it will be very hard to catch yourself until you've fixed it a few times.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so continuing on, we have a nice reinforcement.
And then she switches.
Yeah. Ooh.
But she wants to pay again because she wanted to pick up the hide. But I think she had been working on, if she was on the wrong side, switching, paying again, and then moving on.
Oh, interesting. And then she does come back down this wall.
But that, I think, is because of the handler pressure here.
Yeah. Now, but it looks like you intentionally sent the dog down this wall. If you're going to pick up the hide, pick it up as you're feeding. Don't just snatch it away from the dog. I know sometimes we do that to build the dog's drive, but it depends on what we're working on. In general, if I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to do it as I feed. Notice she's right at the dog's shoulder, and then now she's letting the dog overtake.
So now the dog's covering the corner that she missed before. Oh, and there was a hide there. So even though there was a hide there, the dog completely missed it first pass.
Oh, so there's two hides in that corner?
So there's a hide on each side of that pillar.
Oh, wow. So really tight, close hides.
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
And I think she was specifically working on both.
And the dog did round that.
Yeah,
this
she
area
got way over here.
So that's exactly kind of what we noted at the beginning of the search about how your reinforcement could cause the dog to miss in the immediate space after the hide. And you never know, hypothetical situation, there could be hides that close. Well, here it is, right there in front of you.
And then also just making sure the dog has the hide pattern history of working around something like this. This is kind of more like a very, very small vehicle or something like that. You don't often work careful hide patterns in a space like that. And so the dog they haven't built up that kind of muscle memory of being sure to cover it. Okay. Now I think this is the last hide for this area. And she moves on to some other search areas here, but I think we should move on to the next video.
Go right ahead.
All right. Yeah. So this is a new search area. Okay. So now we're going to look at Brian and Juliet's an NW2 exterior search.
Pause. Okay. So always obsessed with thresholds, right? So I'm not 100% sure where this threshold is.
My guess is it's the double cone here. But
I think it's not. I think it's a small orange cone. I think the double cones are there to block off
from falling off the side.
Or just that the grass is not in play at all, right? So they wanted to make it that clear.
Okay, so you think it's from here to here? That's
my best guess. Okay, that's what I'm assuming. If I were a CEO or like watching this from a CEO perspective, that's my guess. So what do you notice about this start line? I'm talking to patron people, not Natalie.
Yeah, I know. I was answer.
Although Natalie can answer if she wants to, obviously. What I notice is that it is very open, kind of ambiguous start line. The dog focuses on mom, rather than out on the search area. If the dog is beginning in their nose work training, remember, when we start dogs, we start them on boxes. And the reason we do that is because it teaches the dog that some areas of the search area are more productive than others. And we teach them to prioritize objects, right? This is what we later call object orientation. And we usually talk about it as a bad thing, but it's not always exactly a bad thing. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it helps the dog kind of get started on their search and not be so distracted, because we have to filter out some things as not productive. So in general, when I'm looking at a search area like this, I'm going to start on one side or the other, right? I'm not going to start right in the middle and then make the dog kind of end up going like this. When then we say, oh, my dog's chaotic.
Or just going straight down the center, and you don't know if they have cleared either or both of those sets of benches at all.
And then they hit the back wall, right? And then they come back and find it. And this just becomes a pattern. Run to the back wall and come back. And then people think, oh, it's my dog's breed that they can't do thresholds. And it's like, no, this is what the routine you've done for a year, right? Yeah. And of course, I'm not saying this specifically to Brian and his dog.
No, this is just a general trend.
It's a general trend. So just know if that refers to you, if you tend to start like most people do, right in the center of the start line, facing directly out of the search area, rather than either on either side or in the center, but facing a wall, right?
Yeah. All it takes a lot of the time is a little bit of an angle to suggest a start position. Yeah. And people often ask me, well, how do I pick how I start in exteriors? And if I have a wall or the semblance of a wall, that is my default. Yeah. I'm going to start dog into the wall because they have some of the best chance with most kinds of wind you'll get to catch something. So I would probably pick the benches that are on our right, his left here. Why? Because I feel like it would give me more of a sweeping pattern around the whole perimeter of the exterior.
Couldn't you say the same thing about these ones?
Because I want to go out that way to the rest of the exterior.
Rest of it? You think there's more?
The exterior goes that way.
Okay, so there's more of the exterior that I'm not aware of yet. Yeah, I might even start the dog into this back wall. Yeah. Even though that's out of the search area.
So since I was drawing with my hand and not with a real line, and you guys can't see that, I would start into the benches here so that I can do a nice perimeter. Sorry, it's getting wonky. Out and around that way. And there's this big other area that you guys will see in a moment. And then if I need to, I come back along this wall and then cover these benches when I get back. And so to me, that would cover the most with the least amount of doubling back. Of course, if I can tell the wind is doing something specific, I might change my mind on that. Or I could be really weird and make the judge think I'm insane and start my dog over here into this wall and do the opposite.
Yeah. So the other thing about walls and exteriors is that no matter which way the wind's blowing, there's going to be odor collecting along this wall, because either it's going to create some kind of vortex here or it's going to blow straight into the wall. Okay. Straight into the wall like that. Now it could blow along the sides, but same thing. There's going to be little pockets that catch along the walls. Just like when it rains, there's going to be water that collects along the wall. And on a windy day, if there's leaves out and fall, the leaves are going to collect along the wall. The odor is going to do the same thing as the rain, as the leaves, right? That's why walls are so important. That's why they're useful to train the dog to be interested in walls through pattern training, and teach handlers to be interested in walls as well. So anyways, let's see what happens here. So notice the dog kind of asking for a little bit of help there.
Okay, so interestingly, he actually kind of does what I said I might do.
Oh, cute.
And that, gets him to a wall early on.
And notice now the dog is into the sway of things. Okay.
Yeah, hunting.
Let's watch this again. So I'm always looking for good descriptors of energy, right? So when we watch this handler and dog work, what energy do you feel from them, right? So obviously, both it feels rushed to me, right? Dog's moving fast, handlers keeping up with the dog very close, right? There's some crowding energy to it. This is an energy that I call racing. It feels like they're both racing to get to the end. Whereas we could let the dog get just a hair away. I mean, it's a Papillon, so it may not want to work that far, and that's fine. You can move out a little bit. Maybe you don't want to step in the grass for some reason. A lot of times handlers want to stay on the path. It's just, it may not be a conscious thought. It's just you're used to walking on paths.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what we're kind of programmed to do in a lot of ways. So, yes, the big cones were a safety barrier, apparently. So watch this energy again. Watch how kind of quick it is. Notice the dog's intense hunt drive, which means that the dog feels this area is productive, right? That doesn't mean there's odor there, but that there's interesting smells and wind and things that set the dog up to.
And also something about Papillons is that they tend to, if they are invested in what they're doing, they look kind of frantic. Mm-hmm. They have to move their feet very quickly to get anywhere because of their size and their shape and all that. So I think it can actually be quite challenging to look relaxed when you're working a drivey Papillon.
Okay, so we got the question from Linda here about could you walk the start line and follow the dog? No, that's impossible. And here's why. Because the dog's following you, right? So the only way to follow the dog truly would be to not move at all, because every single movement you make influences the dog. So if you go left a little bit, the dog goes left a little bit. If you go right a little bit, the dog goes right a little bit. If you wait for the dog to do something, the dog will look at you for clues. And if they don't get a clue, then they're going to go a direction and wait for confirmation. That confirmation is that you go with them. But in other words, I'm not telling you to direct the dog where to go. What I'm telling you is that wherever you choose to start, you have already by default directed the dog in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the least directing thing you could do is to release the dog to search from the door opening, and let them evaluate that stairwell as they enter it from the door, and then follow.
Because even going to the start line, you've directed the dog to that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Now here is a good place where you could actually utilize this, because there isn't much of anywhere else for the dog to go but to go through the start line. But in a lot of searches, you couldn't, from the most natural position, just let them go, because then you would miss the start line and then you would get faulted for it. And, you know, you could do that, but for competition purposes, you don't want to. Yeah.
In general, what I see from people who talk about following their dog is I see people who are oblivious to all the ways they're directing their dog. Right. And so, yes, you can't. I'm being a little harsh about this. You can follow your dog, but the conditions under which you can follow the dog is when you've bred a dog for high hunt drive. The dog has been trained to a very, very high degree and enhance that hunt drive even further to the point where you don't have any influence over the dog. And if you wanted influence, the dog would throw up the middle finger at you and ignore you. Right? Then you can follow the dog. But if your dog is a normal pet dog that likes you, then you kind of have taken that off the table, unless you're willing to breed a feral monster, which a lot of people in nose will try to do. And you know, it's fun to build that kind of driviness and independence, and my dogs have it, but I don't pretend like my dogs don't notice me in the search. Of course they notice me, and it's not possible to give them complete carte blanche, because they will find something to latch onto in my behavior and follow it.
And, you know, in living with our dogs, we have to, no matter how hard we may try not to, we have to tell them what to do at times and for certain things. And so, you know, it's not like they have complete control of what they're doing all the time. So they do look to us for those things.
Oh, okay. And see, Linda says that you suggested this in a different circumstance. And maybe what you meant kind of was walk the dog back and forth along the start line and then follow the dog when they come in. That's a great strategy, but that's also handler direction, right? So we're not following them all the time. We're following them when we think they catch the odor, right? So it always comes back to a choice on the handler. Unfortunately, because we're on leash, because we're in charge of the food, because we're in charge of so many details.
We're the ones who know where the search area is and
where the start line is.
Where the start line is.
Yeah.
I mean, I do, particularly with larger start lines in this one. And if the wind is in my favor, I have definitely at least a couple of times in competition used going back and forth across the start line. It has never been as useful as I hoped it would be, but with the right wind conditions, I think it really could be.
I did it. I think it was the fourth NW1 I did. It was with a dog named Beckett. It was the first time with this dog. He was a flat-coated retriever, a really nice dog. And it was a big, huge exterior start line, like, I don't know, 50 feet, 60 feet, something like that.
Wow.
And I walked back and forth probably 4 or 5 times. And then I think the 5th time the dog caught odor and ran straight to it. And I got it pronounced on that search. The judge thought it was brilliant. And you know, it definitely is a strategy that works, but
and it has to be the right dog too, because that's the kind of
Yes.
dog that's willing to take that kind of direction
Exactly.
and then take over. Like if I tried to do that with Hazel 5 times, she would get pissed.
yeah, but she would also have caught picked a productive area quicker. And also, I think it would be cruel to do with a dog that didn't have that amount of hunt drive, because the dog would that's also how you teach a dog to walk on a loose leash, is just walking back and forth repeatedly over and over again, right? And so a lot of dogs would be like, I guess I'll just follow you.
Yeah.
Right. And they would be frustrated by it. I could do it with that dog because the dog had enough hunt drive to ignore me.
And wasn't your dog too.
Correct.
So there's a
That
little bit
helps.
more of just a working relationship, not an owner-dog relationship.
Absolutely.
Now this particular start line in this search area, for
Too
me,
small.
is not big enough for it to be worth it. The
you
dog,
could wait for longer
Mhm.
before you start.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit further back.
Yeah.
But you know, giving the dog the access to that whole start line from the stairwell wouldn't really require probably walking them back and forth across
No,
it.
not really. Yeah. Okay.
It's a good question.
It is a good question. Thanks for clarifying. So let's keep watching.
We see some slowing.
Also, Brian says she doesn't like to get her feet wet. I was mentioning the handler walking in the grass, not the dog. So I think maybe you don't like to get your feet wet. But I think the dog following the wall is great, but the handler should move off of the wall slightly so that you're not pushing pressure directly behind the
Now,
dog.
here we've got tables very close to a wall. And so you have to kind of weigh your options of, do I go further back? Do I try to get out in some way?
Yeah.
It's very hard to be ideal here. If you tried going around the table, you'd probably draw
that
a
would
ton of
be worse.
attention to yourself and pull the dog right into you.
Yeah.
But some people do try to do that.
I think when you're forced into a tight space, you compensate by giving the dog more distance.
Unless you have a dog that will double back on you with that amount of
Yes.
distance. And then you just have to be very sensitive to where they want to go.
Yes, and really, if you have that kind of a dog, you need to go back to training and build the confidence and independence in new areas so that you don't have to be kind of walking on eggshells around the dog's issues, right?
Mhm.
But that, to go back to my earlier point about walking directly behind the dog, this is especially important with small dogs who have this innate fear of being stepped on. So you got to definitely keep that in mind. So watch as we come in here. Notice there. I didn't notice that the first couple times that I watched this. Watch it in half speed. The dog pulls off the wall there. Okay.
And lowers the head.
Yes, this is a stalk, right? So if the dog is moving on a straight line and they deviate off that straight line, there's usually a good reason for that. And you need to really pay attention to that. I had a really interesting search recently in Massachusetts where it was just a hide on a blank wall. And it was probably a 100-foot blank wall. It was a basketball court, indoor basketball court. And there was nothing on that wall. Bleachers were on the other side, but this wall had absolutely nothing on it. I put a hide low halfway down the wall, and the dogs worked that wall perfectly straight line until they got about 5 feet from the hide and then beelined away from the wall. And some people drag their dogs back to the wall, and some dogs followed the dog off into a random direction. But nobody took, like, why did my dog beeline off that wall, and stop and let the dog tell them why. Right. And the handlers who did, which I think there was only 1 or 2 of them, the handlers who stopped and watched what the dog needed, the dog left the wall and worked right back to the wall and found the hide. But everyone else walked right past it and never found that hide. And it was, in my mind, a really simple hide.
Was this a seminar hide or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a seminar hide. Okay. So anyways, the dog comes out here and then goes, ew, wet feet, not fun. Okay. So then the dog's in odor clearly, right? So my first alert.
Loops back.
Yeah, my first alert, right? If we're looking at 3 alerts. Sorry. The 3 alerts, the dog has acquired odor, right? And the dog is giving me tons of information, right? It's clearly not in the grass, right? Does anybody think it's in the grass? No, it's clearly up higher than the grass, probably under one of the seats, maybe up on one of the tables. Okay, it's up. And from this dog's perspective, it's high. And notice where the dog caught the odor from way back here to way over here. That's a very broad odor cone. Now that can be skewed because we have a wall, okay? But it's giving me information that in general, what I'm likely to think is that the odor is further back, which allows the odor cone to spread out wider. If the hide were really close, like the closest chair, the odor cone doesn't have as much time to spread.
Although the height of the hide and the mesh of the chair could also be messing with giving it a little bit bigger of an odor cone.
Absolutely. These all things have to come into mind. But how wide the dog is working that odor, it makes me biased to think it's deeper rather than closer. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I'm going to drag my dog over there. It just means I'm thinking if my dog alerts close, I'm going to be a little more skeptical.
And also when the dog is seeing such a big odor cone, it probably means they need more problem solving time. So you just want to be more relaxed in terms of calling it.
Oh, I still have it on half speed. Okay, now we're back in odor.
And now notice how we're back in the exact same places. We haven't gone to the other side of the chairs either.
It looks like it's sped up.
Because she doesn't like the grass.
But maybe that's just how fast her normal feet
yep,
move.
I think it's her. Back to the exact same area again. And then up and an alert. And they were not far off. It's just this chair on the other side. Yeah, so we'll see.
And notice how she doesn't stop sourcing when we get the no. She's still looking for it, right?
It takes the judge a while to get over here. And it's right down there. So we can see exactly kind of why that happened. And Brian was reading that she was an odor, the direction it was coming from. It was just a hair too quick on thinking she had finished making a decision. And maybe it's hard to see her head there. Maybe she was a little bit more communicative to you than she should have been.
Well, and okay, so if you take all these things into account, right? So the odor cone is being very wide. And we know that she doesn't like her feet getting wet. So she's going to be more likely to resist pushing in or to take longer to push in. Like if this were a training scenario, we'd expect her to take a little bit longer to develop the courage to push all the way through that. I just did a hide in a puddle recently and the dogs were like furious with me that they had to get their paws a little wet.
But then when Brian steps in with her, like when he calls the alert and it's a no and she keeps working and then you push in with her onto the grass, she goes and she does it. So I think just a little bit of insistence with that here and she was able to. So if this comes up again in trial, I would maybe, if I was the handler, I would intentionally get us into the area she maybe didn't want to go on her own and make sure it's not there before I call an alert.
Another thing that's really valuable is that I want to point out is the fact that the dog doesn't respond to the fact that he said alert. Okay.
It just keeps working.
Forget that this is an NW1 dog. Imagine this is an elite dog. Because I've seen this happen with elite dogs where the handler calls alert and gets a no. And now that dog is convinced that they're right. Right. Mm-hmm. How much better would it be to have a dog when you say alert who does, and you're wrong, doesn't even stop working. They continue to relocate that hide until they're finished sourcing. Yeah. Right.
Sometimes they even look at you and they're like, why the heck did you call alert? That was stupid. I didn't tell you to do that.
Yes, I've seen that multiple times. So if you have a dog who reacts to the word alert, it's not hard to untrain and it's worth it.
Yeah, but it's very nice to see in this dog that she is not caught up on that.
Not
at all.
No.
Because when the dogs are, then you have this big emotional struggle where they don't understand why they're not getting paid and you want them to keep going and you're annoyed that you got the false at all and it becomes a mess. So it's totally worth untraining. All right, we're ready to go to the next video?
Linda?
What? Oh, Linda's video?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I think we got time for one more.
Goodness, we're slow.
I know. It's an hour and we've done 2 videos.
Terrible. Well, we did have little tech issues. Maybe we can work in.
That's true. Well, I mean, we're going to go a lot longer than I expected. Okay, so let's watch this video.
We've got a little start line here of a yellow cone and a green cone. Notice that she starts kind of towards the right side of that start line. Is there a reason? Since you're watching, you can kind of answer. But anyways, I believe this was blind, but a training practice session, not a trial.
No. Good. I like how much distance the handler gives before moving in. some leash handling stuff there we can talk about.
Careful.
And I think you can't see it very well, but I think the hide is a little elevated on a post behind the concrete post that you can see.
I think this is one I'm going to need to watch and then watch again to comment. There's a lot
There's a
going on
hide in
here.
this corner. I don't know how well you guys can see it. And now, Linda ran this with both dogs. I could have accidentally picked the non-blind one. I'm not totally sure. So if you remember, Linda, whether this one was blind or not blind, you can let us know.
We will be giving our comments in a second. I'm collecting my thoughts. That's interesting.
Yeah, you could easily get sucked into thinking that it's in that tree.
Here, the leash is putting a little pressure on the dog.
On the hard side.
Oh, okay.
And then she sources it. And I don't know, you guys can probably hear that, but the
Okay.
coach or trainer had kind of sent her around to the other side a little bit.
Can you give me a screen, like a frame where I can see kind of the whole search area to a certain extent, as much as the search area as I can see?
Maybe.
Okay. So, yeah, that'll
That's
work.
everything.
Perfect. So, one of the patrons has asked if I do a video on evaluating search areas when you go on a search, a walkthrough, and how to look at a search area and determine what kind of strategy to use and how to use your time and all these things. What are going to be the issues or not? Those kinds of things. And I think that's a really good idea. And so we're going to look at this search area really quickly and talk about a couple things. One, the thing I want to talk about first is the start line. So this is a start line that I would be inclined to actually actively ignore. I don't like this one. I don't like cutting the search area in half.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to work a nice smooth
you would
pattern.
be thinking, goodness, the CO's mean.
Yeah, I would. Look how narrow it is. Like I run I used to run a like 100-pound bloodhound. Trying to get him to go through a narrow start line like that would have been by itself an abusive task, right? I would have had to yank him around just to get him through there because he would have been trying to drag me into all these hides from whichever direction we came.
And I don't know if this is still the case, but for a while in AKC, you were seeing basically only start lines that were about this size. It was really challenging, both for the judges to set up something that was remotely fair, and then for the handlers to get themselves and their dog through the start line really hard. Now, this start line does force this pillar hide to be a threshold hide, which it wouldn't probably be otherwise because you would pick one of these walls given the choice, which may have been what the thought process was in setting the start line, or because there's the path there, but the path is meaningless because it's covered in snow. So who knows?
So, and I'm not saying that whoever set the start line is bad. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But if I were running the search, I would have probably ignored it and started on either wall, partly because Do you think my dog is going to want to search from here? I do. I don't think my dog is going to want to be dragged all the way over here to start. My dog wants to start going to search as soon as they can, and I want to facilitate that as well, especially because that's just a cleaner pattern too. It like achieves both me and my dog's goals better.
Now, if I was feeling very competitive and really didn't want the fault, I would walk through the cones and just walk right over to the wall. Yep. Exactly, just like that.
Exactly. That's what I would do. I would put a cookie on my dog's nose and do it like this, and people would probably laugh at me or scoff at me and say, wow, he like dragged his dog off of the threshold. And I'm like, it's fine, because look, I'm looking for something a little different. I'm looking for cooperation throughout the search, which means this is included in my search. So if I'm not cooperating with my dog here, then I might as well start in a place that I'd like to start. Now, if I were the CO, I would probably put a cone over here and over here, partly because what happens with someone who can't control their dog and the dog jumps into the search area? Well, now they got a fault, and that fault is kind of my fault because of how I set the start line up.
That happened to me at a trial where the CO just miscalculated where her hide was and where the wind was going, and it just only made sense for my dog to scooch outside the start line.
I'm not trying to set up scenarios where people have to break their dog's odor obedience by dragging them to a start line.
Now for me, I would probably pick one half of this or the other.
Sure.
So either have a start line that's here to the wall over here or at the yellow cone to the wall over there. So not giving full choice.
And then you just have the staging area
significant amount of choice
set up where you can, you don't have to walk across this whole thing to get there. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So anyways, we cut this area in half and the dog jumps over here. So now that means we're kind of like jumping back and forth. So it sets us up for kind of a chaotic search pattern.
Well, and depending on your time limit and the size of your search, your memory of what you have and haven't covered is going to be a lot more challenging this way.
Not to mention, this is also kind of how dogs learn to, let's do that problem later and let's leave. Because the dog is in odor and caught it already, right? And decides to move on for whatever reason.
Maybe the tide was blowing more in her face. Maybe she just realized the one under the green table was a little more complicated.
Hey, careful.
Good. So now from here, she's on a good side. I would be heading to this corner.
Yeah, she's in the perfect position to continue the way she's going.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know if it's because of the hide or because of food dropped or something else. The dog is very stuck on the ground there, which makes moving off of this a little bit less pretty than it could have been.
Sure. I also think it's partly that the handler doesn't want to step deeper into the snow.
Right, which is understandable.
And so you kind of pull the dog back this way, notice? And so the dog cuts this way, right? Arcs around us.
Well, the dog actually isn't sure what she wants to do there for a moment.
So let's say I wanted the dog to search this wall, right? Because if I were a really mean CO, that's my hide over here, right? You have to walk through all that snow to get it. So what would I do is I'd anchor my feet here and gently cast the dog off in this direction and just not move. Let's say I don't want to step in the snow because I'm worried of slipping or things like that. That's fine. Just don't move this direction or this direction because that is going to pull the dog off of that wall.
Yeah, make the suggestion with your shoulders, your energy, and everything to send the dog that way.
Right.
And if that's not something you've practiced, you can practice that.
And because now we've pulled the dog off of all of this. Now, that may not matter because notice this hide, the dog caught from way out here and went this way. So it could be that if there were a hide on this back wall, the dog would catch it from all over here. So it may not be important to get all the way to that wall. I've missed a lot of hides in my career. So I'm kind of neurotic about, I want to make sure that search area is covered. Right?
And I had a hide in an NW3 that was approximately like here on a windowsill about that height. And there was an outside corner like this. And my dog, and there was high wind and cold. And my dog had to go around the corner and then work back and up to that hide. And the CO said that people who didn't allow their dogs to go fully outside the search area, some of them got it, but they had a much harder time getting this hide and they had to be very tight along this wall. So you're lucky in the situation if you get to pick up the hide from out there.
Yeah. So now Linda mentions that she complains about these start lines. So one thing I would say is rather than complain, just set up your own start line. I don't mean put your own cones out there. Just start where you want to start.
Them, yeah,
just ignore them. Honestly, one of the really standout moment I think about regularly. We hosted an NW3 in Palmdale, and Jason Hang came out to compete with it from Texas. And I remember watching his search. I was really interested because, I'd known him for a bit because he's an instructor and I'd seen him at conferences, but I'd not really seen him work a dog too often. And he works Shiba Inus, so you don't get too often to see that kind of a breed. And we've talked before, and we share a lot of ideas. I think he's a really great trainer, and we kind of share a lot of
and there are ways
ideas
in which his Shibas and Lumi share
absolutely.
some similarities.
Being primitive breeds.
Challenging in similar ways.
Yeah. So I watched him walk up to a search area and just start at the edge where there was no start line and take the fault because it was a better place to start. And to me, that commitment to your dog and working your dog in the best way for them and saying to hell with the CO, right?
Yeah, I would put a pronounced on that as a judge.
I would, absolutely. If I were judging that, it would be 100% pronounced.
I actually got it pronounced in the search where my dog went out around the start cone to get to the hide.
So I think that's really important, especially if you're looking to search in a way that's honoring to the dog, is think about where your dog wants to start from, right? And we sometimes complain about directing the dog within the search, but don't forget directing the dog to get to the search is also a type of direction that can detract from the dog.
And to go back to what we talked about in the previous video, this might be a search area where I would walk along the sidewalk and see if my dog wants to pull me in. This is similar to an area where I did do that in competition.
Absolutely.
Kind of, walls on 2 or 3 sides, big start line area. Yeah.
So anyways, moving right along. So now because of the handler's movement this direction, we pulled the dog this way, and then we have to pull the dog back that direction, which happens a lot when we kind of move in the wrong way. The dog moves the wrong way. It's like a domino effect. Now we have to pull the dog back the other direction to correct for that.
Yeah, or we think we're fixing it based on the dog's movement, and they think we're doing something.
Yes.
And then, we're both kind of trying to compensate for each other, and it becomes more of a miscommunication. And sometimes, maybe not in this situation, but sometimes just standing still and letting the dog take over again can get you out of that kind of back and forth mutual confusion.
Absolutely.
It's like a very deep corner hide there.
Yeah. Good alert too. And it's nice that the wind is on your favor, but it could have been going the other way where this hide is totally obscured. And that body movement, even bringing the dog back and asking the dog to go in there wouldn't have been enough, right? That maybe the dog would have had to get into this corner and to get all the way to that corner. I've been in those types of situations. So that's why I'm kind of a purist when it comes to making sure you get on into every corner. And again, that doesn't mean pushing the dog into the corner, because I think you will end up pushing the dog out. It doesn't mean dragging the dog around. It just means taking small steps to encourage that behavior out of your dog, which includes training for those corners.
Yeah, it's training it and then it's supporting it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this table hide is quite complex.
Okay, this
we
is
can hear the
interesting.
wind.
We've switched sides. I'm trying to figure out how. Oh, there. I see. Okay, hang on. I gotta see how we got here. Okay, so from here, see the dog's arcing around because the handler is a little too far back. That ends up switching the side like this. And so we end up missing the wall here. Now, it just happens to be that it doesn't matter this time, but I've been in situations where it does matter.
She may also
be
have caught
catching
something on that post.
Yeah. So just like if I let my dog do this, which I probably would, I just have to remember I have to come back to this wall and resume this pattern before I leave.
Or loop from the table into that corner and back.
Yep, absolutely.
Back to the post, so
good.
Even
back to the wall.
Stronger likelihood that she's catching odor. Up from the tree. Up on the wall. I think she thought about going through between the table and the wall there, decided not to.
Now here you hold back significantly more than you've held back any other time. So it's like you're holding the dog in the area. So this would make me question whether it's blind or not. Like maybe the hide's there and that's why you're helping the dog kind of stay in the area. Or it could be blind, but now you've seen enough interest, and this could lead to a false alert where or a fringe alert where the hide's on this side, but the dog alerts on that side because you're holding back. So let's just notice how you've stayed a pretty consistent distance most of this search. And now right here, you've broken that distance, right? You're way further than you have been all search.
Well, and stiller.
Yeah, and much stiller, right? You haven't moved your feet for a while.
Now here you give her another angle.
Yeah, the dog moves in there nicely.
But clearly, watching this to the end already, we know that she catches it more strongly from the other side. It doesn't totally make sense to her to work from this backside. Even though once she has a fuller understanding of where the odor is, she's able to work it from that side. But it's like a vehicle where the odor is going under the vehicle.
Yeah.
And the dog has to work it from the wrong side, get a clear picture of where it is before they can work tightly enough on the right side to work it out.
Absolutely. So now here, when the dog gets to this side, I think it would be good for the handler to move to this side as well. Thinking of it just like a vehicle, right? If this were the end of a vehicle, right, the handler would now be on this side with the dog. This is your leash has phased through the vehicle magically. And I get it. This may be tight here. I can't tell how tight that is between the tree and the table, and you're going to have to do some gymnastics to kind of. I would probably
try to go around and just switch my leash from one hand to the other.
Yep.
Around the tree.
That's what I would do. I think that would have been better at making sure the dog doesn't get tangled, but also making sure there's no pressure so that the dog can drive through the table if necessary.
And this is probably more psychological pressure than physical pressure here.
And notice how, so this is very interesting. Notice just how sensitive the dog is. The dog is inches from odor probably, right? And look how easy it is to get that dog to leave. Like barely any leash pressure and that dog jumps back, right?
Yeah.
It is so easy to influence the dog to leave odor. That's why I'm so hard on handlers. Like, be careful, take pressure off, because it only takes a little bit to miss a hide.
Especially, and so, this was handler movement that was an immediate response to the coach or someone giving them instruction. So now had something to do that you were doing. And so that amount of kind of decisiveness of what you're going to do pulls the dog even more.
Yeah.
And so you can also kind of play with because sometimes you need more of that decisiveness because we're being a little too loosey-goosey in our body language. But you can see when you know what you're going to do, the dog just responds to it immediately. So use that to your advantage and don't use it when you don't mean to.
Yep, absolutely.
Now here she's tight enough. She was like almost fully under the table, that whole move around to the table, and then she's able to work it.
Yeah. Yeah, nice search. A lot of interesting comments come up. We're going to just kind of debrief real quick and talk about the next one. And if you have any questions about any of the comments we made or any of the videos reviewed, make sure to ask them now. We're probably going to talk for about 10 more minutes and then
we have a ton of videos left.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can go ahead and schedule one for March.
And if you're a $5 tier or above and you'd like to have your video analyzed by us
live,
caveat,
no, if you send it for this,
it'll be live. Then start sending those to us because we're more than happy to do that. And we're probably going to have contest giveaways where people get to get their video reviewed live for people who can't afford a full video review slot or something like that.
But obviously this is very detailed, so it's probably going to take us a little while to get through the backlog that we have now. To get into new ones. So if you do send it this month, it may or may not get reviewed next month.
Not every video takes 30 minutes.
No.
In fact, I did a video review recently that took 5 minutes. The search was 2 minutes long, and it took 5 minutes to point out just 2 blatant mistakes.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, so it is going to depend. And we also are kind of laying a foundation. Like some of you have seen a lot of video reviews from us, others of you haven't. So we're going over some of the kind of theory stuff
Yeah.
that we tend to talk about when someone first starts sending us videos. We go over a lot of this stuff in a lot of detail, and then the more
we get to know you.
Yeah, and relationship we have on that stuff, then we can kind of say, remember this thing, but without going into all the details. So I'm sure that the next set will be that much faster because we won't have to kind of re-explain some of that stuff. And so we'll probably suggest that people start, if they're going to watch the series, start with this video so that you get some of that stuff.
Yeah, you never know. So we will be putting another poll out soon about the next video review Blitz. Let us know how this went from your perspective, what you would like to see more of, what you might like to see less of. If there's something you want talked about or something like that, we can definitely do it.
For us to not be so slow, we probably can't do that.
No, it's not going to happen. We're going to point out basically whatever's on our mind. But if there's questions you have or a format that changed that you'd like, just let us know. Any way we can improve the experience for you, we want to try to incorporate.
Yeah, and definitely different videos bring out different topics, but also different weeks. It may be that we're on a string of noticing this one kind of thing, and we're kind of letting other stuff go. Like with any given video, I can't point out every single thing that I see. That would be overwhelming, and it would also probably take forever. And so we try to both point out what we think is most important, and then also what kind of the theme is.
Yeah, when I was a music major, I took a performance class that was basically like this. We'd have 40 students in the class, and each week 3 to 5 of the students would perform for the class, and the class would have to analyze and critique them. And we learned how to critique music, and we learned how to accept critique as musicians. And these are both two really important things. In fact, that's something I'm going to be doing a webinar kind of on recently, is how to accept critique. But anyways, the point was sometimes we get a week where everyone's pointing out the same thing to each person. And it's like, it's not that this is the big mistake you're making. It's that this is what we're all thinking about, because this week was harmony lesson for everyone, and everyone took harmony. And so we're noticing the harmony choices that you made, or something along those lines, right? And the other thing is when someone points out something like, when I would say, your expression, could use a little bit more work if you change your dynamics more, that they would say, it says more about you than the person you're critiquing, that it's probably you. The reason you bring up the critique is because it's something you're thinking about in your own playing, right? And that's definitely true about our critiques. We definitely critique things that we critique about ourselves, right? That these are the things that we've noticed about ourselves and we've worked really hard to fix. And that's why we point them out.
Still working on fixing.
Right. And that's also why you could send the same video in to 5 different instructors and get 5 different reviews, is because they're all thinking about different things, and they're all coming from different starting points. And so it has less to do with you than it has to do with the person critiquing you. And
that's why it's so useful to get input from a variety of instructors, because we are all thinking about different things.
Absolutely.
And we have different things that we think are important, or that we've been setting a certain kind of height in class, or we've been working on a certain kind of handling, or whatever. And so you can get a much more well-rounded picture of things you can fix and all of that.
And I know several of our patrons and physical students either send videos to both me and Natalie, or take classes with both me and Natalie, and they've all told us that it's super beneficial to have 2 different points of view, and that it's useful that we don't say the exact same things. And that's one of the reasons.
See things, even though we've trained together we've been doing nose work together for almost 11 years, and we've been trainers together for many years as well. But we see things very differently, even though we have a similar baseline, the way we like to start dogs, the things we like to build and foundation, and things we think are important, but the way that we accomplish those goals aren't the same.
Yeah. And that's also why, as a trainer, I've always been very strong advocate for going out and training with as many new people as possible, even if that means like not necessarily training, but go and learn from other people. Go and audit a workshop before you necessarily throw your dog at the mercy of whatever the exercise they want to do. But I really think getting other points of view and synthesizing, because what they have to teach is something they've learned. from their experience. And it may or may not apply to your experience, but it is to a certain degree a truth, to use a kind of common expression these days, right? It is a truth of how they've experienced searching. And if you can understand it, it'll give you a tool that you can use.
Yeah. Even if it, only comes back 5 years later and you're like, oh yeah, that's what so-and-so was talking about. And I do, to just reemphasize that, I do think auditing is extraordinarily important. And I know we all want to run our dogs.
Yeah.
But there's definitely something to be said for letting yourself just be in learner mode and not in performing mode of being in front of everyone, or even just in front of the instructor, and being able to take in all that information and try to work through how it applies to you and your dog. But of course, there is certainly a time and place for working as well.
So Irv mentions that perhaps you want to show the entire search uninterrupted before beginning your analyses. Just a thought. I think that's a really good idea. Let us know if you agree with that, or because that's kind of how we did this last one. We watched the whole thing and then we began analyzing it. If that helps you and get an idea and be able to form your own thoughts before we start interjecting and poisoning you with our thoughts, then that's definitely a format we could do.
I think we'll make a point to try that for all of the videos next month, and see how that goes, and you guys can give us feedback on it. Yeah,
absolutely. So anyways, I think that's basically all we have. Thanks so much for watching. I'm very excited about this new series. Anything to say, Natalie?
I don't think so. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next month. NAMA is a week from today. It's earlier this month because we're going to be in New Mexico. We'll be coming back from New Mexico the following Monday. So don't forget, if you're wanting to see that live, that will be a week from today. And send in your questions. I don't know how many questions we have gotten so far, but
I don't think we've gotten too many.
When we get those in earlier, then you are higher on the list, and then you're more likely to get answered as opposed to put off for next month. So hope to see you then.
And thanks to all our patrons that made this possible. We did this because we met 100. We've got to 100 patrons, and now
we're at over 150, which is very exciting.
It is very exciting. So thank you guys so much for making this possible.
Thank you particularly to Liz and Brian and Linda for being live in these videos today. And then
it's nerve-wracking to have your videos lively critiqued, right?
Oh yeah.
If any of you have thought about or actually posted videos of your training to our Facebook group, you guys know just how horrifying that is. And this is way worse because you're in front of an audience,
with us directly talking about it.
Yes.
And so we know that. We also know that handling is hard, and all of that is, it's not easy. And we can see, how much work you guys have put into learning how to be a good team with your dog. And then just the fact that you would send your video in is even, another step above and beyond. And also for those of you whose videos we didn't get to, we are looking forward to getting to those. And thank you for sending those in.
Yeah.
So we'll talk to you guys later.
Awesome. See you guys.